So we're going to move on to a different subject. We heard a lot about certification, setting goals, and executing them. So to elaborate more on this subject, walking the talk, setting your sustainability goals, and executing them. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the CEO of the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, Mr. Randy Durbin.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everyone. Nice to be with you. My third time in Kuching, I think, 2010 for a PATA event, so I've kind of come circle here. So since we are a little bit late on time, I'm going to dive right in and not thank everybody as much as I should for PATA and the local sponsors for having me here and for organizing this event. Great to be with you. So the topic is walk the talk, setting goals. I've also added my own little title to the presentation, Systematic Approaches to Sustainable Tourism. And what I mean by systematic is this: if we're going to make travel and tourism more sustainable, we need all sorts of skill sets, all sorts of initiatives. We need storytellers, we need educators, we have a tremendous need for awareness and training, so we have to build case studies and give good examples. I'm going to talk about the work that we do at the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, the GSTC, which is really putting a very systematic approach. So there are business targets, destination targets, and so forth for sustainability. So I really want to leave two key thoughts in your mind: is systematic and holistic. So let's get right into it. So first of all, who are we, GSTC? We heard from UNWTO earlier. Harry, it was nice to see you again. In 2005, UNWTO and UNEP, United Nations Environmental Program, did a lot of very important work on defining sustainable tourism. They gave us the best single-sentence definition of sustainable tourism we have. It holds up today. And they did quite a bit of work together to kind of lay a foundation in the UN system. Oh, what happened? It's still on screen there. And so they created us to kind of extend that work to create global standards. So they did that in 2007, and in 2008 we released our first standards. It was then called the GSTC criteria for hotels and tour operators, and then we've gone through revisions and so forth. Oh, this screen is flashing, I won't look at it. And then later we created standards for destinations and public policy. And the reason the GSTC criteria are really considered the global standards is because the incredibly inclusive process we go through to create them and to revise them. So the dates you see on the screen for our two standards, one for the private sector, the industry criteria, and the other for public policy and destination management, we put out a call in both cases to literally thousands of entities, and we do that each time at the revision. So those are the dates, the original creation and then revision. Very formal process. So the end result is that the GSTC criteria are really a global standard because of the incredibly inclusive process. And I have on the screen also this organization, the ICEAL Alliance, because we follow their standard setting code, which speaks to that inclusivity, which gives them credibility. The point of all that is that the criteria are a long definition of sustainability. So they were based on the UN's work in the Millennium Development Goals, which were the predecessor to the Sustainable Development Goals. And so kind of starting with that UN definition, the criteria based on 4 pillars of and not just environmental issues, but social issues, cultural issues, and management and governance. And then, so those 2 standards, and that's the basis of our work. We're in a very unique position in travel and tourism. We're the only entity that's in this club, this organization called ICEAL. You may know FSC, you see its logo on paper products all over the world. RSPO is big because of Malaysia and Indonesia with the palm oil production. We've followed the models that WWF and other conservation organizations set for rules of engagement, of how to do verifications and certification. And so we've applied that to travel and tourism and to hospitality. And I have to say this to be very candid. Travel and tourism and hospitality really didn't pay attention for a long time to these issues of what certification means. If I leave one thought in your mind today as you leave the room, I hope it will be this. The term certification is used entirely too loosely. Certification, the term is used entirely too loosely. And we follow guidance and work that these other institutions have done and throughout other sectors. And I'll tell you what I really mean by that comment about certification. But I'd like you to think from a systematic standpoint, we need to think along these sorts of things. What are the standards that we use, the attributes, the things we talk about? So we know, like within the GSDC criteria, we talk about plastics. On the social issue, we talk about fair labor issues. Those are attributes, the standard. Then we need assurance, that is verification of claims. And then we have to make sure that what we're doing is really impactful, that it's measured. And so we follow the codes of this group called the ICEAL to cover all of those different elements. A little bit more about who we are is the company we keep. We have some 34 national governments as members. We grew dramatically during COVID because during the quiet of COVID, a lot of national ministries came to us and wanted to do planning and development for sustainability. We grew tremendously. And then we grew tremendously about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when the work we had been doing quietly in the background with Booking.com for many years went public, and Google Travel and Booking.com and other OTAs that are members of the Travel Alliance, a Travelist group, I should say, made it known publicly that the work they do in putting a badge on hotel search results is based on our work and on the GSDC criteria. But look at the brands that we work with, from Airbnb to major hotel groups, again, 34 national governments. We've been with Indonesia since 2015. We helped them create national standards for destinations. So we're not very famous, but we're extremely well known to governments and to big brands with lawyers who are looking at risk and credibility. And very quickly, to give a little bit more flavor of who we are, our board of directors come from all over the world. We have TUI, we have Airbnb on the board, we have ITB Berlin, major companies, JTB, but public sector as well. And if you just flip through the faces and names, let's go back to the first one. There's Natalie Kidd of Contrepid, who gave the keynote yesterday, a very valuable member of our board. So it's a diverse board, majority women. They're Asians, 2 from Japan, 2 from China, 1 from Korea. We're global, we're multi-ethnic, we're non-political, we're truly a global organization. And our place in this business of standards and certification is this. When those UN agencies created us, they set us on a course to start with guidance for good sustainability for hotels and for tour operators, real building blocks, right? Tour operators and hotels are really building blocks of travel and tourism. And then we moved on to the public sector. So when you look at global standards, we play this important role where we're the keepers of the standards for hotels, tour operators, and destinations. But when you think about the complexity of travel and tourism, you know, it's really made up of a lot of subsectors, isn't it? Aviation and cruise kind of follows these 3 quasi-UN agencies, but they don't really have standards as such. They have guidelines. And then MICE criteria and attractions, nothing has been happening globally, but we're going to work right now. We just started formal process of developing GSDC MICE criteria and GSDC attractions criteria. So you'll be hearing a lot about that. And you can give your own contributions anytime. You can go to our website and contribute, but we're going to do a lot of in-person consultations, online surveys, and so forth. So that's enough about us. To walk the talk and to be systematic and to be holistic on sustainability, to work through all the different elements of sustainability, we really need good verification systems. We need training and awareness for people to understand all the things we need to work about. But this business of assurance or verification I want to talk about, and it's kind of in the title of the presentation about certification. And I just made the comment that I hope when you leave the room, you'll appreciate this comment and remember this, that certification is used too loosely. I want you to think, instead of certification, the generic term verification. What we mean is having somebody from the outside look at your organization to give some kind of commentary, some kind of review, some kind of award, as to how true your statement is. Whether our food is truly local, where our establishment is clean or whatever, that's verification coming from the outside. And we've really struggled in travel and tourism by using the term certification too loosely. So what we've done at GSTC is we've studied ISO standards for the very definition of tourism, and we developed in 2016 an accreditation program to put a mark on good certification. And these things are very important. Why? Because ESG has been rising. Many stock exchanges in the world are requiring businesses to report on their performance on sustainability, and that needs to get a lot better. The first generation of ESG wasn't very good, and it had very little external verification. There's pressures now to get external verification of the claims by businesses. There's increasing consumer awareness about greenwashing, and there's incredible movement suddenly on regulatory pressures. It's coming from outside Asia initially, but I think it's going to grow. Just a couple of weeks ago in Brussels, the EU Green Claims Directive was passed. And I think this will have global impacts because I think other countries of the world will look at this. And they actually have guidance on what a business or a destination can say about sustainability. So whether you like it or not, you have to get more systematic about it. You have to be careful what you say, because there is concern and a lot of false claims out there being watched. In the UK, this Competitive Markets Authority is slapping penalties and publicizing and embarrassing and shaming businesses for saying too much or inaccurate information. And even in the United States, where there's not as much of a regulatory culture, the Security and Exchange Commission of the US government is looking very hard at claims. And so this is all growing, and I think we're going to see this in Asia, and I think we're going to see this globally, that the claims for sustainability, now that it's sort of trendy, now that climate change has punched society in the face, there's growing awareness, there's a demographic shift where younger people throughout the world want a more sustainable world, so there's a lot more attention on it. So we have to be better, we have to be more systematic, and let me talk a little bit more about what I mean by being systematic. So, if it's not all certification, and the generic term I want you to use is verification, let's talk about what I mean. So verification is somebody from the outside looking inside your organization to tell the world, yes, they're acting that way. What do we mean by the different levels here? Well, if you talk about yourself, that's a self-assessment, right? First-party self-assessment. In our world, we talk about third-party verification or third-party certification. What do we mean by third-party? Third-party is bringing somebody to look at your organization that is completely independent, completely neutral. They will give you a pass or they'll give you a fail. That's third-party. Whereas second-party would be somebody outside your organization, but their impartiality, their neutrality is not well established. Could be your brother-in-law talking about you. There could be somebody with a conflict of interest. So getting a true third-party entity to look is what's necessary. We believe that the best third-party certification is done by a certification body that opens itself up to review from the outside. And this is particularly important in travel and tourism and hospitality. Why? Because the institutions that have formed and developed largely in Europe over the course of 25, 30 years, many of them call themselves certification bodies, which we don't think are certification at all. Why? Because most of them will coach a business to improvement and then give them an award, a certificate. That's completely in violation of the very term certification. If this sounds like boring, bureaucratic, academic stuff, please listen more carefully. It's not unimportant. Because every other sector in the world, when they certify something for health, safety, hygiene, whatever it is, they follow ISO standards for what the term verification, what term certification means. Tourism is really in a vulnerable position by just loosely throwing this term out. And we're making tremendous progress finally in the last couple of years of people appreciating the work we did when we launched an accreditation manual in 2016 because of the greater awareness from governments on consumer claims, the greater awareness of the financial capital markets on proper ESG, companies with teams of lawyers worried about risk and what they're saying absolutely buy into what we're doing. And so we're really getting a lot of progress on that. Just to finish this thought, just other examples of what's first party versus third party. All three of these major brands are GSDC members, three major hotel companies, Hilton, Accor, and IHG. In all three cases, those companies know that what they do internally, Hilton Lightstay, Accor Planet 21, IHG Green Engage, these are internal guidance systems. But we hear people in the travel industry all the time talk about IHG's certification. No, that's not certification. Certification comes from the outside. These are guidance systems designed from the center to help the business improve, right? All three of these organizations are now looking at ways that they can push each of their thousands of properties to improvement, then reach out for external third-party certification. So it's important if we're going to make progress to just really understand what it is we're talking about. And just to quickly summarize the work that we do, we have two programs of external verification. One is accreditation, where we have an intensive look at a certification body, and I have the image of a body, a human body, going into a CT scan or MRI or whatever that device is that takes thousands of photos of inside our body. It's very intrusive. That's what we do at a certification body. And only a few have gone through it because in travel and tourism, very few have followed international norms for their very meaning. We've also had this mark called GSDC Recognized Standards, where we put a mark on the words of a standard as to whether it complies with our global standard, which is based on this highly inclusive process. A lot of the standards we see in travel and tourism are made by one person in a isolation and nothing compared to the inclusive process we do. We've faced a tremendous amount of confusion on this term, and we're going to phase it out for a lot of applications to businesses. We're keeping it for national standards. Indonesia is a good example. I mentioned their Ministry of Tourism has a national standard for destinations that is harmonized with the GSDC criteria. So we'll keep that program for national programs, but we're going to phase it out for businesses because it's been so misunderstood to be some kind of mark on the actual certification process. So again, to summarize kind of the systematic thing, I said this earlier, but put it a little bit different way. If you want to be systematic, you better be clear as an organization of what attributes are we going to work on and prioritize. And attributes, again, would be plastic reduction, fair labor practices, fair hiring, gender equality, reduce energy, carbon emissions. Those are the attributes. We have to figure out how we're going to measure them. And we've done very poorly in the travel industry about having many measurement techniques. Harry talked about the INSTO program, which is excellent for destination. There's very little universal tool agreement on measurement for businesses. We're working now with the Sustainable Hospitality Alliance and GBTA and Travelist to work on universal agreement on some measurement tools and getting the verification right. You want internal verification, you want internal audits, but you can't call them something that they're not. So that's the summary. We also believe very much that we need to really help develop pathways for all of our businesses and all of our destinations. It's impossible, really, for most businesses and most destinations to suddenly say, oh, we're going to be sustainable, we're going to get this badge. That's the wrong thinking. You should be thinking first, how can I improve for a while so I deserve a badge? And so we've really kind of shifted a lot of our thinking to help businesses and help governments develop pathways. And the way we do that is talk about setting up targets for continuous improvement along two lines. First, the number of attributes we're working on. We'll prioritize them. We all know we need to reduce plastics yesterday. We all know we need to reduce our carbon emissions. So those kind of tend to be at the top of the list for very good reason. But so we prioritize the things we're working on, and we set time targets for when we're really going to tackle these and really get good at them in our business and our destination. And the other dimension is, what's the level of verification? So we'll start with just some good internal audits and some good self-assessments, and then as we feel more confident that we're doing better, then we can bring others from the outside for verification. So this kind of pathway, this staircase, if you will, we think is really the effective way for a business or for a destination to really work for improvement. And here's a couple of examples of the way it's being applied at the national level. We've been working tremendously for the last year and a half with both the country of Turkey and Singapore Tourism Board. So here's two case studies. They're very current, very, very systematic. Turkey empowered, the parliament gave the Ministry of Tourism the power to revoke a business license of a company that does not follow their guidance on first safety during COVID and now on sustainability, starting with hotels. And they asked us to help design the program, and we helped them come up with this very kind of structure. By 2030, every hotel, 22,000 hotels in Turkey, must be fully certified to our scheme. But they're doing it in stages. Stage one is each hotel has to show some external verification, about 30% of their standard, their attributes of the GSTC criteria. And then 2 years, 3 years later, 70%. And this is very effective. We got a national program helping hotels get sustainable, and then they have to get the external verification. Singapore Tourism Board is now subsidizing certification. And so my time's up, but just very quickly, these are two prominent examples at a national level, but this model works in the smallest of businesses. Please think about this. Can we expect our staff at our business, or my tour operator, my hotel, or whatever, to just suddenly embrace all the aspects and get good at implementation? No, we need to do this in stages. We need to educate them. We need to engage all staff. We have to improve. We need continuous improvement. And I would just ask you to think along those two lines of how many attributes are we working on this year? How many next year? What's the level of verification? Increase both over time. Just set your own targets at realistic. Because you need targets, you need performance indicators, and that's the way you make progress. And then just finally, I don't have time to get into detail, but this whole approach, we're gaining major alignment by we're talking directly with major hotel chains, including Asian chains like Centaur, Mandarin Oriental, Ascot. We're talking with their partners and other NGOs, and something like 9 out of the 10 of the largest OTAs in the world now are working with us, working together to create common methodologies. And that includes Traveloka here in this region, but really all the big players of communicating to the traveler on sustainability. And then the buyers of hotel space in both leisure and business markets are making real progress. All of the major players in all of these spheres are aligned, and that's what it's going to take, is to get clarity of purpose, universal measurement tools, universal attributes, educate our staff to improvement, set these targets for improvement. So I wish you well on your successful pathway to sustainability. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Randy.